There's a moment that catches a lot of people off guard after leaving a narcissist. You expect distance, you expect silence, maybe even indifference. But instead, something very different happens. They reach out, they react. Sometimes, suddenly, intensely, even desperately. And it feels confusing, because this is the same person who acted like they didn't need you. The same person who pushed you away, who made you feel replaceable, who looked at you like your emotions were an inconvenience. So why now? Why did they panic the moment you finally walk away? The answer has very little to do with love and everything to do with control. Before you left, before you made that decision, you'd probably spend weeks or months or even years watching them pull away. They were distant, cold, dismissive. You tried to get closer, they moved further. You tried to talk, they shut down. You cried, they got annoyed. And somewhere in that process, you started to believe something dangerous, that they didn't care at all. Not a little, not deep down, just nothing. That belief made sense, because how do you explain someone watching you fall apart and not flinching? How do you explain someone who can ignore your texts for days, who can go to sleep while you're crying next to them, who can treat you like a stranger in the same house? You can't, not through the lens of love anyway. So you told yourself they didn't care. They never did. And when you leave, they won't even notice. That was your expectation. You thought you'd walk away and the world would keep spinning for them like nothing happened, like you never existed. But then something strange happened. You left, and they didn't stay calm. They didn't stay indifferent. They exploded suddenly. They're calling, texting, showing up, sending long paragraphs, leaving voicemails that switch from sweet to vicious in 3 sentences. And you're standing there thinking, wait, I thought you didn't want me. That confusion is real, and it's exactly where they want you. Because the calm version of them wasn't freedom, it was control. And the panicked version isn't love either. That's collapse. Let me explain something that changes everything. A narcissist doesn't feel safe because they're loved. They feel safe because they're in control. And as long as they have control, they can appear completely calm, completely unaffected, completely fine without you. Because control gives them what nothing else can: predictability. When they control the dynamic, they know what you're going to do. They know you're going to wait, you're going to forgive them, you're going to chase them after a fight, you're going to cry, then try harder, then stay. That predictability is their oxygen. They don't need you to be happy. They don't even need you to be treated well. They just need you to be reliable in your attachment to them. And here's the part that hurts. You gave them that. Every time you stayed after they pulled away, every time you apologized when they hurt you, every time you waited for them to come back, you taught them something. No matter how badly they treat me, I'm not going anywhere. And once they learn that lesson, they relax. Not because they love you, because they've won. So they act distant, cold, indifferent. They scroll on their phone while you're crying. They walk out mid-conversation. They make you feel small. And you think, how can they be so calm? But here's the truth. You couldn't see. They were calm because they believed you were still within reach. That's the only reason. Not because they were strong or healed or didn't care. Because they had you exactly where they wanted you, close enough to use and far enough to ignore. And that belief, that quiet, arrogant belief that you would never actually leave, that was the trap. And the moment you walked away, that trap snapped shut on them. So what actually changes when you leave? Not just physically. Something shifts inside you. Maybe it was one final lie. Maybe a moment where you looked at them and felt nothing. Maybe you just got bone tired, but something broke loose, and suddenly you stop. You stop chasing, stop explaining, stop hoping they'll finally hear you. You just stop. And that's the trigger. Because for the entire relationship your emotional energy was flowing toward them. Even when you were angry, even when you were hurt, even when you were crying alone in another room, you were still connected to them. They could feel your attention, your hope, your fear, your need for them to change. That emotional flow was their supply line. And when you leave, really leave, that flow doesn't slow down. It stops completely. And here's what they experience. In that moment, first, confusion, because this doesn't match their script. You were supposed to come back. You always came back. Then irritation. How dare you not respond? Don't you know they're allowing you to exist in their life? Then something darker, a crack opens. Because for the first time, they don't know what you're going to do. You've become unpredictable, and unpredictability is terrifying to someone who built their entire emotional stability on controlling yours. They can't predict your next move, your emotions, whether you still love them or hate them or feel nothing at all. That uncertainty, that loss of a predictable emotional response from you, that's when the panic starts. Not because they miss you, because their system just broke. Let me go deeper here, because this is where most people get stuck. They see the panic, the messages, the calls, the sudden desperation, and they think, oh, they do love me. They just couldn't show it. Now that I'm gone, they finally realize what they lost. I need you to hear me clearly. That is not what's happening. What you're seeing is the collapse of three things, and none of them are love. First, loss of control. Their predictable emotional environment. They knew how to make you feel guilty, how to make you chase, how to make you apologize, which buttons to push to get the reaction they wanted. That wasn't love. That was a control panel. And he just walked away from it. Now they can't make you feel anything. They can't provoke you, pull you back in with a half-hearted apology or a love-bombing text. You're not responding the way you used to, and that feels to them like the ground disappearing beneath their feet. Second, loss of emotional supply. Narcissists don't have a stable internal source of self-worth. They need external validation to feel real, valuable, like they exist. That's what you're providing. Every time you looked at them with love, you were filling a hole. Every time you fought for the relationship, you were proving they mattered. Every time you got hurt by their behavior, you were confirming they had power. That's supply, not love. And when you leave, the supply stops. Not because they pushed you away, because you chose to stop giving it. And now they have to sit with themselves without your admiration, your pain, your attention. That silence, that emptiness, is unbearable for them. Third, loss of predictability. This is the sneaky one. You think they want you to be happy? No. You think they want you to be stable? No. They want you to be readable. Because as long as they know what you're going to do, they feel safe. When you were chasing them, they were safe. When you were crying, they were safe. When you were angry but stayed, they were safe. They knew the pattern, but now they have no idea. Are you seeing someone else? Have you told people the truth about them? Are you laughing right now? Do you even think about them anymore? Not knowing is a special kind of torture for someone who needs to control the narrative. And that's why they panic. Not because they lost you, because they lost the ability to predict you. And without that, they have nothing. Now, let me show you what's happening inside them. Because on the outside, they might look angry, desperate, maybe even heartbroken. But on the inside, something much darker is unfolding. Here's something narcissists hide very well. They are not calm people. They act calm when they're in control. But underneath that mask, there's chaos, shame, rage, fear, emptiness. They can't regulate any of it on their own. That's why they need you, not for love, but for regulation. Your presence, your steady emotions, your willingness to absorb their chaos and still stay. That was doing something for them. You were holding their instability so they didn't have to feel it. When they were angry, you absorbed it. When they were empty, you filled it. When they were spiraling, you anchored them. You didn't know you were doing this. You thought you were just trying to love someone difficult, but you were actually acting as their emotional regulator. And the moment you leave, that regulator disappears. Now they're alone with everything they've been dumping onto you for years. The rage they projected onto you is still there. The shame they made you feel is still theirs. The emptiness they blamed on you never left. And without you there to carry it, they have to feel it. That's the collapse. Did you ever notice how they seemed to relax after a fight? After they'd hurt you, watched you cry, and then watched you stay. They weren't relaxing because the problem was solved. They were relaxing because they just confirmed you were still attached. For that attachment, your willingness to stay no matter what was filling a void inside them that has nothing to do with you. A void from childhood, from old wounds, from a self so fragile it needs constant proof of its own importance. You weren't a partner, you were a medication. And now you've stopped prescribing yourself. Your presence was regulating something they couldn't regulate themselves. Not their schedule, not their image, their internal world. You were doing emotional labor you didn't even know existed. Every time you stayed calm while they raged, you were regulating their chaos. Every time you forgave without an apology, you were regulating their shame. Every time you hoped things would change, you were regulating their hopelessness. And they didn't thank you for it. They didn't even notice it, because to them that was just your job. But the moment you leave, that job is vacant, and they can't do it themselves. It's not sadness you're seeing in their panic. That's withdrawal. They're not grieving you. They're drowning in the absence of what you did for them. So what does this panic actually look like? Because it's not always tears and begging. Sometimes it's confusing, contradictory, even scary. You'll get texts at strange hours, 11 p.m., 2 a.m., right when you're finally starting to feel okay. At first they might seem sweet. I've been thinking about you. This doesn't feel right without you. I miss the way we used to laugh. And for a moment your heart will crack open, because this is what you wanted to hear for so long. But look closer. Where is the apology? Where is the accountability? Where is the acknowledgement of what they did? It's not there, because these messages aren't about you. They're about them feeling the loss of control and reaching for anything that might pull you back in. Then there's love bombing, which is intense. Suddenly they're saying all the things you begged to hear. You're the love of my life. I made a terrible mistake. I'll change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. They might show up with gifts, grand gestures, public declarations. It feels like a movie. But here's the test. Ask for something specific. Ask them to name one thing they did wrong. Ask them to take real accountability. Watch what happens. The love bombing will stop immediately, because it was never about change. It was about seducing you back into the role you used to play. Then, there's anger, which is frightening if you're not ready for it. When sweetness doesn't work, they flip. You were always the problem. You're crazy, just like everyone said. Fine. Leave. I never needed you anyway. This is panic, wearing a mask of rage. They're trying to provoke you, to get a reaction, because any reaction is better than your silence. If they can make you angry, you're still connected, still thinking about them, still engaged. Don't fall for it. Silence is what they can't handle. Anger, they know how to fight. And then there are guilt tactics, designed to exploit your empathy. I can't eat. I can't sleep. My life is falling apart without you. After everything I did for you, this is how you leave. They'll paint themselves as the victim, the abandoned one, the one who tried so hard and got nothing in return. And if you have a big heart, this will gut you. But ask yourself, where was their empathy when you were breaking? Where was their concern when you were the one who couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function? It didn't exist, because their suffering is always real, and yours was always an inconvenience. Finally, there's hoovering, which is when they reach out after weeks or months of silence, not because they've healed, because they've run out of other sources of supply, and they're circling back to see if you're still an option. The message will seem casual. Hey, just thought of you. Or strategic. I found some of your things. It's a test. They're not back because they love you. They're back because they're bored, empty, or between supply sources, and they want to know if you're still hooked. Here's where it gets really confusing, because their panic looks exactly like caring. The calls, the tears, the desperation, the words you always wanted to hear. It looks exactly like someone who just realized they lost the best thing that ever happened to them. And if you don't understand the psychology, you'll believe it. You'll go back, and then within weeks, sometimes days, they'll go cold again because they got what they wanted. They proved you're still attached, and now they can relax back into control. That cycle is not love, that's addiction. Let me say that again. They are not addicted to you. They're addicted to the feeling of being able to reach you whenever they want. That's the difference. When you love someone, you miss them. Their laugh, their mind, their presence, the way they see the world. When a narcissist misses you, they miss access. They miss knowing they can text you and you'll respond, knowing they can hurt you and you'll stay, knowing they're still the center of someone's world. You are interchangeable to them. The supply is what matters. And that's why they can move on so fast when you finally stop responding. Not because they're heartless, but because they found someone else to regulate them. You weren't special to them. Your function was. And I know that hurts to hear, but you need to hear it. Because as long as you believe their panic is love, you'll stay trapped in guilt. As long as you think they're heartbroken, you'll feel responsible. But they're not heartbroken. They're dysregulated. And there's a massive difference. What happens when you don't respond? When you don't react, don't come back, don't give them the emotional hit they're looking for. That's when the panic either turns into desperation or withdrawal. Desperation looks like more messages, more attempts, maybe even showing up at your door or contacting your friends. It can feel scary, but it's still the same thing. A frantic attempt to re-establish control. They might say anything, promise anything, become whoever they think you want them to be. But watch closely. It's all performance. The moment you give in, the performance ends and the old patterns return. Withdrawal looks different. If they realize you're truly unreachable, they may go silent. Not because they've accepted it, but because they're regrouping. They'll tell themselves you were the problem, that they never needed you, that they're better off, and they might even believe it for a while. But that silence isn't peace, it's suppression. And eventually, when they need supply again, they'll circle back. That's why no contact is so powerful. It doesn't just create distance, it creates a permanent shift in the dynamic. Because the moment they realize you're not coming back, not responding, not even watching from afar, something in them knows the game is over. They lost. And that loss isn't about you being gone. It's about them being powerless. Now let's talk about your shift, because this is the most important part. You didn't walk away to punish them. You walked away to save yourself. But somewhere along the way, something changes inside you. At first, you might still feel guilty. You might wonder if you overreacted, if you should have tried harder, if they really are as bad as you think. That's normal. That's the residue of their control still working on you. But then something shifts. You stop checking your phone for their messages. You stop analyzing their last post. You stop hoping they'll finally see what they lost. And instead, you start to feel something unfamiliar. Quiet. Not loneliness, just quiet. And in that quiet, you start to hear yourself again. What you want, what you need, what you will never tolerate again. That's emotional independence. That's the moment you become unreachable, not because you're hiding, but because you're no longer available for their chaos. You don't need their apology to heal. You don't need their recognition to know what happened. You don't need them to change to feel safe. You've taken back the one thing they could never give you, control over your own inner world. And that changes everything. They didn't panic because they suddenly realized your worth. They panicked because for the first time, they couldn't reach you anymore. Not your attention, not your emotions, not your response. And that's what changed everything. Because the moment you walked away wasn't just the end of the relationship. It was the end of their control over you. And that's the only ending that matters.